Hello PLO Order, welcome to the latest video. This time the topic is Maniac Small Blind. So we are on the button and Small Blind is a bit aggressive player. How should we react? And well, let's get started. And with the starting point. Now, I created a few simulations with Solver. But I think when we try to make simulations versus aggressive players, there's huge problem, which I'm going to explain in a bit. But the thing is, from Solver, what we can take first is whether it's 300, 400, 500, or 600, the strategy for button and blinds is very similar. So to make a simplification, you don't have to change your button, small blind, or big blind strategy, whether it's 6 max or 3 max or something in between. So that's the first thing. That's why I made all the sims here 3 max, because it's so much faster, less variables, and so on. So all the sims are from 3 max. And then I use micro stage rate, which is higher than on normal sims. Now, the problem is we get output. We can force small blind to do certain things, and then we can output. But the problem is that even if we force small blind to 3-bet certain amount pre-flop, it still tries to create as good ranges for that as possible. So it's not probably the same range that Maniac would 3-bet. And then post-flop, if someone is aggro pre-flop, then often they are over-aggressive post-flop. But in Solver Sim, small blind plays perfect GTO approach post-flop. He just has wider range, but he doesn't make any mistakes post-flop. And that's the problem, because we can separate pre-flop from post-flop. If we play versus aggressive player, then slow playing, making traps, certain hands might have higher EV post-flop because opponent is too aggressive. Certain hands might have lower EV because opponent puts us too much pressure. So we're going to discuss during the video also, should we adjust the way that Solver shows us, or should we do something else or something in between? And the problem is we can make a sim versus aggressive. We could make sims on certain boards, on different boards versus very aggressive c-betters to see how it affects, but then once again turn and river would be more balanced for the player than in reality. So to make Solver sims how to play actually post-flop versus very aggressive is really hard. And then to get pre-flop from those is nearly impossible at the moment. So now the question might be, should we do these sims at all? Is this a waste of time? No. Because we can see how Solver reacts and there's some tendencies like, okay, opponent 3-bets more. What does button do? Does he fold more, 4-bet more? How do we do? Do we start to limp or no? That was the initial question. Should we have a limping range from the button if there's aggressive player on the blinds? And we can get answers to those. And then use those tendencies to figure out our real strategy. So, let's get started. This is normal button action around 50-50. Of course, different simulations you will have 45-55, 49-51 and so on. Depending on the rate, slightly on whether small blind does something and blah blah blah. But overall, simplified button strategy is 50-50. Open half of your range. 6 max, it might be slightly lower. There's some changes, whether it's 6 max or 3 max. But for these sims, the starting point with versus normal small blind, and big blind is always normal in these sims. So small blind is just the one who goes bananas. But starting point 50-50. Now, versus this normal strategy, small blind responds with 14.84%, 3-betting 10%, calling 6%, with certain rates. If you change the rate a little, it changes. curious thing is solver doesn't defend 20%, which was for many years considered the GTO defending frequency, but in reality it actually isn't. So very tight normal small blind, 3-betting 10%. That's the number you need to pick up here. And then if small blind 3-bets 10%, then button action versus that 3-bet is fold 20%, call 71, and 4-bet 9. So this is a starting point. We open half of the hands, and versus 3-bet, we fold around 20%, call with most of our range, and then we raise 9%, which is around 4.5 of our initial range. Very aces heavy, like we 4-bet all aces, and then some ace king kings, and double suited high Broadway, and that's it. So when we have the aggressive small blind, now in the sims versus aggressive small blind, the button introduces a limp range. And now I made sims where small blind 3-bets 20% and where he 3-bets 30%, and I couldn't get it higher. No matter how I tried to force 40 or 50, it's not possible. Solver doesn't do anything stupid, so it's by even trying to force it, it just cannot 3-bet more. And yeah, I made a sim where small blind has fold or pot option only, so he is potting 100% of hands. I actually removed the fold, so if small blind 3-bets 100% of hands, then it's quite easy for button to play versus that. I mean, then it's super easy. Then button opens like 40% of hands and never folds, and just when we know that small blind range is 100, then when we open and button 3-bets, we are just shoving 98% of hands, because 94% is slightly stronger than 100%. So if opponent shoves 100%, we can play 94 and generate small edge. So there's the answer. If small blind is shoving any hand pre-flop, how wide should we stack off? For heads up, almost 100%. Because there's 1 BB dead money and then our 3.5 BB, so there's 4.5 BB dead money. That almost beats the rate. So what we call with 5%, see the flop and just shove 95 or so, 94. But we don't have those situations in real life often. So when small blind starts to 3-bet more, solver gives button a limp range. And normally in high rake environment, the button really doesn't limp. But there's a really small percentage, like 1 or 2%. So if you give a solver an option to limp, it finds a hand to do that. It always does. But if we like limp 1% of hands, we can simplify and never limp. And that's in higher rake sims, we don't even give button option to limp. And that's really good strategy. When the rake is really low, then button starts to limp more. But now even in small stakes, when small blind becomes more and more aggressive, there is limping. And interesting thing is button never limp folds. It either limp calls or limp raises. So if we limp button pots, small blind pots, sorry, big blind folds, we call with everything we have. Whether it's 20% 3-betting range or 30% or even more. So it's really good takeaway that we don't have limp folding. If the hand is not good enough to even limp call, then we don't even limp it. And then what hands button limps? Then it's really wide all over the place. There's no significant tendencies. It like takes small portion of each different category we have and puts those to the limp range. Then the hands that are going to be limp 4-bet are pretty much aces, depending on the opponent, most of the kings or half of the kings, and then those high Broadway double suited hands. Pretty much kind of same 4-betting, same in imp, then it would be imp 3-bet, then we would have normal 4-bet range. And the wider small blind pots versus the less button 4-bets, that's interesting tendency that I found out, that the more aggressive small blind is, the less button actually starts to 4-bet, or actually that's a actually that's a 3-bet, so it shouldn't be 4-bet. If we imp, button opens, that's 2-bet, and then the re-raise would be 3-bet. But often 4-bet is what people understand. But that's the thing. The wider small blind range is, the more button wants to call and use the positional advantage. And that was kind of weird. One thing, that the two sims are not exactly the same. Between 20 and 30% 3-betting. In one, there's option if we imp for the small blind to imp 2, and the other one doesn't. It doesn't change the sim that much. Let me see that. Very. Just a second. Yes. On the other thing, there's option for small blind to call, but then the range, continuation range, isn't that different. That might cause the error, and I didn't do another sim to check it up, so there's small margin of error in this. But I think the difference whether small blind can imp or not when we imp is not causing the difference, so there's tendency behind it. But to the numbers, this is the button opening action when small blind 3-bets 20%. Remember, normally it's 50-50. So now we fold slightly more, so we tighten up the range a little. We tighten up to 45%. So when small blind 3-bets more, we don't widen our range. We tighten up a little, and we imp 12%, so it's a significant amount of hands. And then we open 33%. So it's pretty much 1/4 of hands we imp that we want to play. And then if the small blind 3-bets 30%, you can see that we tighten up the range even more. Now we tighten up almost to 40% only. Not huge, but removing the crappiest hands, limping almost the same, and raising almost the same. So what happens here is that we have opening range and limping range. Now we take away the bottom of the limping range, add the bottom of the opening range to limping range, and then open a bit tighter. But you can see it's very similar. So whether we open 33 or 29, in reality, doesn't mean a damn thing. No need to be perfect, it's enough that you're close. But one option is that we start to imp some of the hands. There are some aces, not much, but we imp from all categories. And then the weaker the hands are, the more it's weighted towards the limping. But then there are definitely some stronger hands in the limping range too. Now, when the small blind 3-bets 20% or more, what happens is button never bet folds. So normally, you can see here, this is versus normal small blind. When we open, and this was from the first line, when small blind 3-bets normal 10% amount, we fold 20% of hands. So we do have a bet folding range. Now when button starts to 3-bet more, we don't. So we don't bet fold. So easy way to implement that strategy, which is a good strategy in my opinion, is that if the hand can't stand a 3-bet, then you shouldn't open it versus aggressive 3-better. And Solver approves that strategy. Versus 20%, we 4-bet 20% of our opening range, which is then quite a lot. If we open around 33% of our hands, then 3-bet would be around 7% of our whole hand range, which is way wider than ace is. And the thing is, solver wants to 4-bet also some double suited medium rundowns with some frequency. That's the part where I would not use solver strategy pre-flop versus maniacs. Because when you 4-bet, I mean, here small blind has pretty nice folding range too. So let's say I can show you the sim. It's actually here. The versus 20% 3-bet. So if we pot and small blind 3-bets 20%, or actually 21.5 is what it ended up. And then we pot, then we can see that we have almost 33% fold equity. In reality, if Acro 3-bets and you 4-bet, he never folds. You all know that player. 0 fold. So it would be actually interesting to make a sim where we force the small blind to 3-bet 30%, but he never folds to 4-bets. I'm not sure if solver is capable, because it would be high on minus EV. But we can't force small blind to 3-bet more than 30% no matter what we set and try to force the frequency. It just doesn't happen in solver. So would be interesting, do we 4-bet or not? But we know that solver tendency, when we don't have fold equity with 3 or 4-bets, it removes the bottom of the range. So in reality, I wouldn't start to 4-bet any rundowns versus maniacs, because he never folds. You're not pushing pre-flop equity, SPR1. Nothing good can come out of that. Call the 3-bet. When you hit the flop, get the money in as a huge favorite. So that's the thing, that don't follow solver strategies thinking that solver knows the best. It's optimal strategy in an environment that is never actually reality. So you should never follow that here when we force small blind to 3-bet more. But we can take away some tendencies. And then when the small blind 3-bets 30%, we can see that solver starts to 4-bet twice as much. So of course, the wider small blind 3-bets, the wider solver 4-bets. For solver, it's easy. And huge fold equity. Like in the previous hand, it folded 33% of hands. Now let's take the sim for the 30% c-bet, 3-bet. So actually only 25, it couldn't go up. It was 30, but then the sim ran slightly more, so 25 is the max that we could get. And now 30% fold equity, so almost the same. Yeah, 21, 25, the difference is actually not too huge. Well, it was 30 when I almost stopped the sim, but then on the last runs, it dropped even more. So, now the conclusion. What should we do when we have the maniac on the bottom? On the small blind, and we are on the bottom. Then there's a couple of things I would take away from the sims. One is we definitely have a limp range. And according to limp range, I would add some like rainbow aces to the limp 3-bet range. Or some nice double suited Broadway rundowns, ace king queen deuce, ace king queen 4. And just maniac is never a maniac, like some common maniac. It's always the maniac, individual, and every maniac has different ways of being aggressive. if there was a maniac on the small blind, what you need to do is figure out what he's doing to know what you should be doing. There are overall principles, but limp from the button, see what he does. If he 3-bets every time when you limp, he puts. Okay, now we start to limp re-raise with huge portion of our strongest hands. And then he reacts. If we limp, he 3-bets around 1 out of 5 times. Okay, we can start to limp and call. And see how he reacts. And then when you start to limp more, see how he adjusts to that. When he sees that, okay, you're limp 3-betting a lot, maybe he tones down, or maybe he just wants to gamble. Who knows? Second thing is, even we are in position, and even when opponent 3-bets only 20% or so, we don't bet fold pre-flop. I mean, normally we bet fold only 20% of hands from the button versus small blind. Normally we call with almost anything. And when the small blind is aggressive, we don't bet fold. If you find yourself bet folding pre-flop in position versus aggressive player, that should be a warning sign. I should not be doing this. Something is wrong. Either I open it too wide or I'm folding too much 3-bets. Which one is the reason? I need to change it. So every time when you find yourself bet folding in position versus aggressive, something is wrong. 100 pips deep every single time or more. So that's a definite warning sign. I need to fix this lead. No, I mean, can't find a reason why we should have a bet folding range versus Maniac. If you're not comfortable calling 3-bet, don't open the hand. But versus Maniac, we should call 3-bets in position actually quite a lot. It's just then post-flop, it can be nightmare. It's a totally different thing how to play post-flop versus why 3-betting range is. We will have the next video, actually, it's already set. It's low to mid boards and 3-bet pots. And we can see versus different 3-betting ranges, how those boards should be played. And another thing is, even when solver wants to start to limp 3-bet rundowns and so on, I would not. Versus Maniacs, we want to push pre-flop equity when we have the best hand. We have 60-40 equity. Like aces is a perfect example. We have the best hand pre-flop. We don't have to hit the flop SPR1. We can just get it in mathematically. We print money. 7-6-5-4. Not so. We have to hit the flop. We have to hit the flop well to win a showdown. So don't push pre-flop hands that require a good hit on the flop. Those are the hands where we want to see the flop. When we hit, let the Maniac be Maniac. The implied odds are insanely high versus Maniacs than they are in normal solver sim post-flop. If there would be a way to make a sim where the implied odds post-flop are a lot higher, would be interesting to see what the results would be. We don't have that option at the moment. No software can do that. But you should be very inclined to see flops versus Maniacs in position with hands that can hit good enough to stack him off. And then just be patient. Of course, when we talk about post-flop versus Maniacs, it's totally different. Versus some, we want to make a lot of semi-bluffs, so some we never bluff. It's not a Maniac, it's always the Maniac. So, here are some of the hands. Oh, not the hands, sorry. Some of the frequencies that solver sims created. Not so much direct ranges that, okay, if small blind is aggro, you 3-bet, you 4-bet, this and this. It's not that. Still, 4-betting range is very aces heavy. Here versus wider, small blind 3-bet, the range gets a bit heavier. or wider, there's more pocket kings, more double suited hands with ace, and another Broadway card. And then there are also some, let's open up that 30% sim. Here's our 4-bet in range. And let's remove those. So let's say that, what do we have besides aces, kings, queens, and jacks? So without Broadway pairs, we can see that there are these ace, 6, 8, 4s in our 4-bet in range. And in reality, my advice is not, because now solver assumes 33% fold equity, and that's why it, I mean, you can see the EV, with that fold equity, the EV is 63. So, very close. It's not like printing money. If you don't have that fold equity, then 4-betting ace, 8, 6, 4, double suited becomes minus EV. You don't push your pre-flop equity. So these are a lot of the hands, ace, queen, 6, 4. So those are the hands that you're much happier to see the flop. And then some rundowns, 9, 7, 6, 5. It's weird that it decides to 4-bet when it's slightly minus EV. Of course, folding would be minus 7,000. So in reality, we shouldn't start to 4-bet wildly. And why do I have this slide here? Haven't I gone forward? What? Who messed up? Oh yeah, here it is. Just went back. So, solver starts to 4-bet more. In reality, we shouldn't. We have more implied odds, no fold equity, than call 3-bets with wide range. I mean, I would still 4-bet aces, good kings, some ace, king, queen, queens for sure, and then like double suited Broadways with 2 high flush draws. Those we can just 4-bet. We are crushing the opponent on most flops. But even with those hands, calling is still very profitable. So, don't go bananas even when opponent does. I'm sure solver wouldn't if we could simulate the real aggressive. And who knows, I might do the sim where the small blind never folds to a 4-bet to see how much it drops. I'm quite sure it drops a decent amount of times. But even in that sim, in reality, seeing the flop is more profitable in real life than in the simulation, because the implied odds are more, because the opponent is aggressive. He won't do stupid stuff. He will stack off without odds, which solver never does. So, I hope you enjoyed. Didn't call the ranges once again. If you want to know more, you want to get deeper, you want to know what are the aces that we need 3-bet in the solver sims and so on and so on. Say it on the Discord, I have the sims I can show you. We don't go too deep. There aren't any clear takeaways on those ranges. But I hope you enjoyed. For some, there's nothing new, except that we do have a limp in range for the macros. And just remember that these stats are not optimal way to play versus Maniacs on small blind. It's how solver does. But we always have to think, do we want to follow that, or can we come up with better strategy? Right? Well, next week we continue with 3-bet on the flops, on small and medium flops, kind of flops that we miss without 3-betting range heavily. So, or opponent 3-bets normal or wide, we can see how to play those flops. So, looking forward to that. Thank you for watching this video. Hope you have a safe run in your galaxy. I will see you next time. Stay safe.